really excited to have you here. I met you, what was it, like 3 years ago at the Nye Foundation?
Yeah, roughly.
We were recording a video. We were working with the Idea Center, and we met you there. And you know, and I've been following everything you've been doing, and it's pretty amazing. Let me tell you. I don't know. I don't know how you do it. It's like, you know, I thought I was a risk taker. You know, like the same thing that what I said with Jennifer, that I thought I was a workaholic, but she bit me. I thought I was a risk taker, and you bit me. Like really, like. Thank you for being here, Chris.
No, thank you. And I just think it's so funny how we come full circle sometimes. And
yeah.
Like pretty quickly after I moved to Miami, and here we are, ready for the next chapter and talking again.
Awesome. So I want to get to know you. Tell me where you come from. How was your life growing up? Tell me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I'm originally from Los Angeles, California.
So we were born there?
Yep.
Raised there?
Raised. Actual LA too. Like, you know, sometimes people like cap for a city that they're not actually from.
Right.
That's what people do here too. They're like, I'm from Miami, but they're really from Hialeah or Miramar.
Yeah. Or even like Weston. That's the one I really get.
Yeah, that's
at least Hialeah, Miami-Dade County. All right. But I'm just from Los Angeles, California. I went to school in Connecticut and then moved to Miami. I came down here originally for work. Didn't know a single person in Miami.
When you went to school, what school you go to?
I went to Wesleyan University.
And what was your degree that you were pursuing?
So my undergraduate's in psychology and sociology.
Okay.
Really just kind of like the study of people. And like those two things just stood out to me because I think of psychology as the study of the individual and their impact on the group, and then sociology kind of the group's impact on the individual. And I think that they kind of work together relatively well.
And when you were younger, what was your dream? Like, what was it that you wanted to do when you grew up?
You know, I don't know if I ever had a specific like kind of fixed outcome, and I still don't know if I know what I want to be when I grow up. I think I want to be like anybody else, like wants to have purpose and wants to find impact in their work. But I mean, I really like sports. I wanted to be an athlete, like a lot of kids did.
What's your favorite sport?
So baseball. I'm a baseball player.
He's one of the few that are left. Baseball, you know that I grew up watching baseball. I mean, I'm Dominican, so you have to, like, it's in your blood. But lately, baseball has been losing a little bit of momentum. Like, there's not a lot of fans anymore.
It's a changing world, and you know.
What do you think is the hottest sport right now? What would you say, Alex?
Probably soccer. Just because it's a universal sport.
I stopped watching sports a long time ago. I was like, you know what? I'm out. I'm not good at it. I mean, I play basketball. I like playing them, but watching them, it's like, okay, like, really? Like, I'd rather play. Going back to the whole thing, school.
Yep.
Was that something you really wanted to pursue? Or was that something that you just said, you know what? I'm just going to get a degree?
So education's been super important to me and my family kind of growing up. My family's not originally from the States. My family's actually from Cuba. And, you know, they came here, American dream type thing. And my generation was really the first one that had that expectation of going to college. My dad went to college later in life. But the opportunity for me to kind of get it the first time around was really, really important to them. And so when the opportunity came for it to go, I went where I got the most money and, you know, kind of called it a wrap.
That's awesome. So how do you end up here in Miami?
So I came down here. I didn't know a single person in Florida. I cold applied to a job at Knight Foundation. I had done some internships with like local nonprofit groups and done some work with kind of community building type stuff. I really wanted to understand how funding worked. I wanted to understand how dollars and the flow of capital worked, especially in the social impact space. And so my plan was to apply to a bunch of different foundations and funders and kind of see where that shook out. And I kid you not, the Knight Foundation was the very first letter I sent in. I just ended up on the right desk at the right time. And I got, you know, a life-changing opportunity to be an intern originally. And then that kind of just snowballed from there. I moved to Miami.
Let's talk about being an intern, because I think internships are really, really important. People today, I don't think they're thinking about internships. They want to just get the job and get paid, and it's all about money. It's not about learning and understanding the world. What would you say to somebody trying to get an internship somewhere? What was your secret ingredient that you threw in there to make sure you get that internship?
I'm going to be quite honest, and maybe this will be a theme that comes out through the podcast, but I think a lot of life is arbitrary. I really do. I think it's a lot of the times we even if we're successful, we think that, we're so successful because of ourselves and because of how great we are. I don't really buy that. I think it was the right time, right place. And I think that if you you can play the numbers game and apply to more things, generally is probably a good thing. But my advice for around internships would actually be more on the employer side, just the importance of paying a living wage. I never would have been able to come to Miami and have this entire life and what I think to be a decent community impact if Knight Foundation hadn't paid $15 an hour for me to be here.
Right.
I didn't know anybody. I wouldn't be able to stay with them. I had no money. I'm a student. I don't come from money.
Right.
And so by them lowering, getting rid of that barrier, quite literally changed my entire life. Because once I had that kind of stamp of approval, like the sky really became the limit in a way that just wouldn't have been possible without a paid internship.
Awesome. And tell me a little bit about your time there at Knight Foundation. How was that?
It was great. So, Knight Foundation, Jonathan James L. Knight Foundation is a major national foundation, about $2.4 billion endowment, roll out about $120 million a year in grants, along a lot of different kind of program areas. I worked in the Community and National Initiative Department, specifically looking at the Miami portfolio. So about $28 million had been spent at that point around innovation and entrepreneurship in South Florida. And so just working kind of from like soup to nuts, looking at communities type stuff and community engagement opportunities, but then also seeing and understanding who's getting dollars, how's that funding is being distributed.
You know that I'm a product of those grants. I went to Miami-Dade College, and then they had just started the Idea Center. And that's where I started the whole pitch competition, the startup challenge. I won second place, and that what gave me kind of the mindset to start a business, and I knew I always wanted to be like on my own and do my own thing and not have a regular job. And Miami-Dade and the Knight Foundation gave me that opportunity. So it was an amazing thing. And I think you guys have done a lot of work here. Like I think the lab, you guys have something to do with that. What else?
I won't say you like me and us just because
the Knight Foundation.
The Knight Foundation, but they've supported dozens and dozens of efforts around entrepreneurship, from events and meetups to physical spaces like Lab Miami and the Idea Center, conferences, Black Tech Week, entrepreneur support organizations, Endeavor Miami, lots of.
What do you think about Miami as the next entrepreneurship hub? You think we're gonna get there?
I am more concerned with what happens if it does happen. Does that make sense? I'm more concerned with, okay, let's game plan this out. Either we become an entrepreneurial center or we don't. Like, I think there's relatively compelling reasons for why either of those things could happen. If it doesn't happen, then I think we see something that's similar to the arc of Miami continue. If it does happen, we kind of enter this kind of brave new world, uncharted territory that I don't think we're paying enough attention to what the implications are. So I actually think the question to ask is, okay, let's assume that we become a center of innovation in Miami. What does that mean for the people that are currently disenfranchised to start with?
Right.
Yeah, that's the question. Those are the things that I think that we need to be asking ourselves. I don't know if we do a good enough job as a city.
Right. How do you think we can improve that?
Improve the discourse around it?
Yeah.
I think too often the innovation or entrepreneurship becomes looked at as an absolute good and an end unto itself. Like, we just need to have all these entrepreneurs and all these innovators. That's great, but the thinking is that those folks will help make Miami more successful. And kind of greater community success is the overall end game here. So let's not sell ourselves short and pat ourselves on the back when we have a bunch of entrepreneurs. If we still got people, living in the streets, or we still have people struggling with all these really complex and intricate social challenges. I think, how do we leverage Miami's spirit of entrepreneurship and our entrepreneurial energy into greater community sex more broadly is really important. And those conversations and how we leverage the incredible grit and determination that is so present in Miami in a really unique way, to making sure that the benefits that are too often shared by too few are shared by more folks. Right.
How is it that you go from being an intern to getting hired? What did it take?
So, right opportunity, and an individual that really supported me a lot was Matt Hagman, who was the longtime program director there and then eventually a congressional candidate. He gave me an opportunity as an intern to just kind of be like, I don't really get what you're doing, but just go figure it out, like what you want to do and just go do it. And I don't even know if I did anything specific on that internship that was, particularly groundbreaking. But it kind of built up enough confidence in him that he went to bat for me and advocated to to kind of get a new position set up for me to enter and to participate in it. And again, it's one of those things where I think it's easy in hindsight to look back and like pat ourselves on the back and be like, oh, this is because I was so singularly great. But the fact of the matter was that they needed, another person in the role.
Right.
And I was willing to do it. And so I kind of left it.
But I'm sure you did a great job.
Oh, I did. Oh, no, I got no problem talking myself up. Like I did well.
People that are really good, they tend to not see that. And it's like, like we need people to help us. Like I know Matt Hagman, I'm always thankful to him and Leandro as well from the Idea Center. Because they allow me to be able to be in the position that I'm in today. And if it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't be here, right? Yeah. So, I always think about that. But I'm sure you put in a lot of work. And same thing with, everybody that puts in all that work. And how do you go from, I know Matt Hagman when he stepped down from the Knight Foundation and he started running for Congress. Then they put you in charge.
Yeah, so I got a really unique opportunity to be the interim director while they did a full search for the next program director.
How long was that?
About 7 months.
Yeah,
it was again, I think if I look back on the arc of my time in Miami, it was a really pivotal inflection point for me. Because I was before that point kind of behind the scenes doing work and like new folks and new things, but then suddenly, you're the face of stuff and everybody's like, who is this kid? Like, we got to like talk to him now. And it's like, yeah.
Was that a problem, being young and, not being your typical director of something? Did people treat you differently? Was it hard to convince people to do things? How was that?
That's a really good question, a really important question. I would say that by the time I got to be the director, I felt I had enough confidence, and I felt I've always had pretty good confidence. I feel like I'm capable of doing a lot of things in life. I kind of adopt a posture where no task is too big, no task is too small. I'll file papers and photocopy stuff, or I'll talk to CEOs. I really don't have a problem doing anything. But I will say being young and black in philanthropy is a really interesting combination. And
you don't feed the demographic. You just don't look like the demographics.
No,
the people that are in charge right now, you don't look like them.
No.
So
I mean, there's so many. I can't even. There are like a lot of funny anecdotes about people just not knowing who I was, which is totally fine. And I'm not saying that in anybody at all, but like people that I've been emailing with for like, months, and then like they get in for the meeting and they're like, oh, I'm actually meeting with like the director. I'm like, yeah, right here.
They think you're like his assistant or something.
Yeah, or a doorman or a dry cleaning person. And I like it though, because for me it's like, I like the element of surprise, because you kind of get people's true colors when they don't know who you are or they don't know what you represent. And I think about some of the people that I've stayed the closest with. Those are the ones who like really believed in me and really gave me the respect that I feel like I deserved. I mean, yeah, it's wild to be like. I think there's a lot of time people will tell you what you can and can't do. And I think above all, it's really important to know what you can and can't do, and sometimes use that to supersede what other people want to impose onto you. So, moving here by myself as a 21-year-old kid.
How do you get that confidence to do that? Just because, like, okay, I know it takes time and go through life to build that confidence. How? Like, how do you come up with this? Like, for example, for me to just move somewhere, it's like, okay, I got to think about it. Like, well, how am I going to do this? How do you do that? You have to be very confident. You have to believe in yourself a lot. How do you do that?
I do. I mean, like I'm extremely privileged to have very supportive parents who kind of are always in my corner and always kind of giving me the encouragement that I need to be successful. I also had the good privilege of getting an education in a way that a lot of folks don't have as seamless of an opportunity to complete an education. And then I don't know how to say it except that life is too short to take yourself too seriously. I think a lot of times it's the fear of failure that ends up crippling us more than actual failure, right? So it's like the first time you fail, it's like that's a good thing to have happen to you, because like, oh, this is the worst that can happen. I can handle this. And I think we get so often caught up in like every single thing being life or death decisions, when in actuality, like, I'm not an emergency room doctor. If I have a bad day at work, nobody's dying. Like, we're shuffling papers around. Okay, great. We probably should have done this way. All right, I got a paper cut. I didn't die, right? And I think that sometimes we think that our work and we think that what we do, in many ways the most important thing,
Right.
part of our life, but it's also, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter
Right.
relative to like how we get anxious about things and fear the worst.
Man, that's the way to live life.
That's
You know,
a pretty
and-
strong philosophy.
And that's something that I've been learning lately. It's not something that I knew. Let's say like 2 years ago, I was like, oh, business, all about business. All I care about is business and making sure my clients are happy. Now I'm like, okay, I need some time for myself. I need to like think. I need to, like, for example, this podcast is me being a rebel. This is me saying, you know what? I feel like doing a podcast. Why not do it? Because when I'm 60, I don't want to look back and say, oh, man, I wish I would have done a podcast. Or I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. So that's a really good life philosophy. And it worked out for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And like even like right here, right? So like this is gonna be on the record somewhere, right? The worst thing that happens is I say something that maybe I shouldn't have said, and some people get a little salty. Like, but again, it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
it's like in the grand scheme of things, when I'm on my deathbed, I'm gonna think, oh man, this one podcast 60 years ago, I really shouldn't have said that. Like, no. But what might happen is that something that I say might resonate with somebody in an interesting way that helps them live a better life. So like, I'll take that chance. 8 days out of 7.
That's the way to do it. Oh, man. All right. So after that, you became the director of a Knight Foundation for that period of time. Then what do you do?
So I made the decision to leave the foundation.
How do you make that decision? Okay, so it's like, you see what I'm saying? It's like, Chris, how old are you, Chris?
I'm 24.
Oh, man. 24. I'm 25, 26.
Nice.
We're all like that millennial hustlers range. And you achieve a lot that for a young person, you know how they say it's like a young guy, you achieve pretty much every goal for any young person. Anybody will want to be you. How do you say, okay, I got to this point and now I'm leaving?
Yeah, I think a lot of times social comparison is our greatest strength as humans and also our
Right.
greatest weakness, right? So social comparison can make us want to be stronger people, and especially if we're like kind of leveling up with people, it's a really great tool. But it's also our greatest weakness because we kind of impose ceilings on ourselves, and we also get caught up in somebody else's race. Like I happen to be a distance runner, and it's, I'm running my own race. Like I appreciate the friends and other folks who are and the mentors who have helped support me, but I don't subscribe to the notion that, okay, you've done X, Y, and Z, so now you need to kind of continue along this path and like get things into there. That's not how I got to where I was. I got to where I was by getting on a plane and coming to Florida for the first time with absolutely no plan besides this job. I got to where I was by going 3,000 miles away for school because it was the most efficient way for me to get an education. I got to here because I graduated in 3 years and everybody was taking 4 because I just knew I could graduate early, so why not? If I get caught up in other people's races, like that's not how I've gotten to where I am. So for me, when the opportunity came up to lead the Miami Urban Future Initiative, it just made a lot of sense. I want to be an executive director. I want to have the ownership of an organization. I believe in the work. Miami deserves a think tank. We're a major U.S. city.
Tell me a little bit about your project. How was it?
It's good. So it's called the Miami Urban Future Initiative. It's housed at FIU in partnership with the Creative Class Group and Dr. Richard Florida. Funded by Knight Foundation, really looking at the future of Miami's economy. So for context, Miami is the 8th largest metro area in the country. We've got about 6 million people. And there's not really a major think tank looking at the future of our region. And I think part of that stems from a legacy of fun in the sun. Miami looked at it as this like playground,
city,
and
yeah,
it's not a
it.
real thing. But that does a huge disservice to any kind of like serious urban planning of what is a major American city. And so the opportunity to lead an effort that's going to be looking at some of these challenges and trends and opportunities really piqued my interest and really was something that I thought I could have added value on, and something that I really wanted to see be successful. And so while I was there, we released 7 reports total. Looking at the future of the economy, everything from affordability to talent trends, business growth and competitiveness, globalization, entrepreneurship and innovation, really just trying to tell the story of where Miami was doing well, where Miami wasn't doing quite as well. And the work continues now. There's a great team at FIU, and Dr. Richard Florida and his team are doing a great job, and they're going to kind of continue it on. It's a 5-year initiative that hopefully will be much more than that. And it's just a really important opportunity for Miami to take itself seriously.
Awesome. What was the worst decision you've ever made in your life?
So I feel pretty good about most of my decisions, I would say. Off the top of my head, nothing really comes as like a catastrophic decision. I really try to focus on inputs as opposed to outputs, right? So what am I doing on the front end to maximize my chance of success on the back end? And just because something doesn't necessarily work out doesn't mean that it was a bad decision in the moment. Mm-hmm. If I think about decisions as like, okay, I got all the information and all the data points in front of me, right, and then use that to make the most informed decision at the time, there are no bad decisions. Right. And so I feel like my process has been pretty consistent. I mean, there's things I look back on and I was like, okay, well, going forward, I might weigh this or this more heavily. But I really don't feel like anything I've done is just a categorically bad thing necessarily.
But what is something that you're like, okay, I did this, even because, for example, we all made bad decisions. And if we don't make those bad decisions, we probably wouldn't be where we are today. So they still add to the whole book that we're writing every day. What would you say is the one thing that you did something you're like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that, but okay, like you learn from it and you move on.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm perhaps the one thing I would say. So I'm almost done with a master's in public administration, mm-hmm. And in like, if I had to go back knowing what I know now, well, what I could have done is I should have spent more time doing more research into other programs that I could have done at the same time. And if knowing what I know now, I went back, I would probably do it in business administration instead of public administration. But I mean, aside from that, I really feel pretty solid, and that's like kind of so that's really important to me to feel like I take a long time to make decisions. I really agonize over stuff, but then once we're good, all right, we're good. You know, it's time to move on. Time to let the dice roll. Because when we get so caught up in like second guessing ourselves or like get caught up in this revisionist history, I think it's really dangerous at times. If you're learning from what you've done before, awesome. But if you feel like you have a pretty good process and you feel like you're making pretty informed decisions, just because something doesn't work out the way exactly you planned it, doesn't mean that you should.
Well, I mean, that's life. And what was one of the best decisions you've made?
The best decision I made, I mean, probably coming to Miami originally, I have to say. I think it was like the moment where I just like got really, really firm about just running my own race and doing what I felt was best. I had a lot of people that I have a lot of respect for that were just like kind of like, what are you doing? Like this is like a weird move for you, like a lot of my peer group and a lot of people just who goes to like those kind of schools end up going to New York, DC, right, Boston. It's like, yeah, well, right now I'm waiting. I could be the 1,000th person that's exactly like me doing exactly the same job in one of these cities, or I can do this kind of weird thing in this kind of weird city, like in a way that I think is like super interesting, and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but it'll put me on a different track. And like looking back a couple years like after the fact, it's like, all right, like where are you, like where am I, and like how I feel about like the path that I've gone to get there. I'm like, well, I'll take it. And so I think the best decision was probably following my gut and running my own race and not getting caught up in the idea of inevitability of something else.
Okay, so now you go over to FIU. You're the executive director of the Miami Urban, Miami Urban
Future Initiative.
Future
It's
Initiative.
a mouthful.
Yeah. And you step down, and now what?
Yeah, so I think in life, there's really, so I'm extremely grateful for a lot of the opportunities that I've had and the growth that I've had professionally in Miami. I just think that there's other opportunities to grow as people. And sometimes when I felt my growth was becoming very like one-directional in some senses. So still learning a lot, still doing a lot of really interesting things. But it's putting on a suit and tie every day. It's, kind of operating with measured tones. It's like being very careful about certain things. And I really felt like diversifying the growth, like just like a startup needs to diversify revenue sources, I wanted to diversify my growth. And so I think the growth that comes from what I'm going to be doing next, which is spending the next year or so traveling the world, meeting different people, and the growth that comes from being exposed to a greater diversity of cultures and ways of being is really important for my long-term development. And so, yeah, again, it's a little bit of a gutsy call, but I made a decision to step down and to do something else. Because, again, I'm not running somebody else's race, I'm doing mine.
Right.
And I think that in the long run, this is something that I'll look back on as a really important inflection point for me. And it's one of those things where I've checked out the inputs and I feel pretty solid about it.
What keeps you up at night? Like, what do you overthink about? I want to get to know Chris when nobody's looking. It's like, okay, what are you thinking, man? Like, what's going through your head when you do all this stuff?
So it's really tough. I just think in general, people are endlessly fascinating. I love just learning and watching people. I used to always say if I had one superpower, it would be to be invisible, just because I want to see the way people interact with each other when I'm not there, or the way that people interact with their surroundings, or what they do when nobody's there. But something that keeps me up at night is understanding. I don't know how to say this without sounding just really pessimistic about the world, but just why we can't contemplate our mortality as communities better. I don't know why we are so oriented towards inevitable positivity. So I get really concerned about people not considering the full range of possibilities of what can kind of come from their actions or the actions that are being made around them. And I think that when we only look at the positive possibilities, we develop a lot of blind spots that when inevitably some of these negative things happen, we're just not ready for. We're so surprised by income inequality. We're so surprised by people, experiencing homelessness. We're so surprised by inferior education, and we're so surprised by all these things because we didn't consider that there was a possibility. And I'm not saying that just considering it as a possibility will make it easier for us to find solutions to some of these really hard challenges. But when we just don't take a global perspective that not everything is always going to be all right, I think we really run the risk of developing blind spots. And that's what keeps me up at night. The idea that something is going to be sneaking up on us or not occupying as much of our consciousness as it should be, and what that means for folks, especially folks who are traditionally disenfranchised or don't have the opportunity to spend as much time thinking about these kind of things because they're more concerned with more immediate things.
What do you think about social media and what it has done to society? What do you think about it overall? It's a very broad
What has
question.
social media done to society?
Where people think that what you see on social media, that's life, right? They live their virtual life, and then
You think that's the case?
I think that's the case, man.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of people out there that, especially younger people, that get influenced by everything that they see, right? Yeah. And they think that certain things are the standard of how life should be. For example, when I go speak at schools, all the kids want to be YouTubers, and they look up to people like rappers that are, talk about drugs
6ix9ine.
and all the 6ix9ine. Remember when they asked me about 6ix9ine? It's like,
do you know who that is? Do you know who 6ix9ine is?
It's like, come on, this is what our society is forming, So as 8-year-old kid is looking at all this stuff, and then when he grows up, he wants to be like that.
Okay.
Is there anything that we can do to fix that?
I'd actually like to add on to the fact that social media is really a game of comparison.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. So, I would just go back to my other point about social comparison, right? But I also would push back and say this isn't inherently new, right? We've been socially comparing ourselves throughout all of human history.
Yeah. This is kind of like a hyper comparison time.
Things are happening faster and things are moving quicker. But if you look at the exponential rate of technological change, this is actually relatively consistent with what we would expect, right? The world's getting smaller, but it's also getting more distant. We're more connected, but we're more disconnected. All the cliched things that people talk about, it's happening. I think, again, the question that I'm more concerned about is what are the implications, not is this happening, is this not happening? Because I think you can argue and that this isn't that much of a departure from things that happened before. I think you could argue this is an entirely new technological moment, but I'm more concerned with seems like it's here to stay. It's not going away tomorrow.
Right.
So what are the implications long term as a society? What are the positive externalities and what are the negative externalities? Let's fully consider the positive and negative externalities and then try to control as much as we can to make this really be used as a tool for good. And for connection, as opposed to a tool of isolation or a tool of social comparison in a negative way.
So, okay, let's go back to traveling the world. What was going through your mind when you thought about this? It's I'm going to go travel the world. Why?
So the first thing that went through my mind was, and this is something I was talking with somebody about yesterday, what would my grandmother say? My grandmother came from Cuba in 1955. with 3 kids. And my dad was born in the States a year later. She worked as a seamstress for 30 years, worked really hard to kind of make a life for herself and her family in America. Ultimately, basically raised me when I was born in California. And, she just absolutely grinded. So what would she say? Would she be like, oh, this is what I fought for. This is what I spent all that time in a factory for. So my gay 24-year-old grandson can go like find himself around the world. Like, would that be like lit, or would that just be like, what are you doing?
Right.
Like we came here to work hard. Like, you're
Right.
doing well. Like, why is it a departure? So what was going through my head was like, first, what would she think? But it's one of those things where there is so much good that's happening around the world in ways that I think it's very hard to see and appreciate and understand when you're in a fixed location in one place. And it's an incredible privilege to be able to do something like this. Like, it's absolutely incredible. But given that it's accessible to me, I actually feel it would be almost irresponsible of me not to try to do something like this. I'm doing this for a few reasons, but one of them is to show people that, yeah, you can do it. And like over the last couple of weeks after I started telling people I'm going to be doing this, people said, oh, I'm looking forward to living vicariously through you, or oh, I would love to do this, but I would love to do this, but I can't do it, or can't whatever. And there are very real considerations for a lot of people. We live in a country where something crazy like 60% of folks can't afford a $500 emergency without borrowing money or putting on a credit card.
Right.
But like the people in my immediate social circle who are saying like, oh, this is so brave, oh, this is so, I could never do that. Or like, I would want to do that, but I can't do it. My question is like, well, why don't you? Like, actually, why don't you?
All right, let's make a plan right now.
Tell me what your barrier is and let's talk through it. And this is an extremely privileged conversation, and I don't mean in any ways to diminish the very real family responsibilities that people have, financial constraints that people have. But this is so much more doable than people realize. And part of like what has become like an emerging like interest of mine is like, how do I explain to people that you can go do this too if you really want to and
All
you
right,
really
Chris,
prioritize.
step 1, I want to travel the world.
Okay.
What do I do?
Well, where do you want to go?
I want to do something like you. It's
Okay.
the same thing. What was the first step?
I
I want you to be completely real with me. What was the first step?
So what I will say is that the really biggest, 'cause I've been sniffing around a trip like this for a while, the biggest step that I took in terms of like being able to know that I could do this now as opposed to having to wait till another time was looking at finances. It was like, all right, how much is this roughly going to cost? How much do I spend a year in expenses? So I have tracked every dollar that I've spent since I was 18 years old. So I can tell you exactly how much money I spend every single month on food, on travel, on transportation, on entertainment, on everything.
Yeah, most
since I was 18 years old.
people live without noticing how much money they spend. And if you put it in a spreadsheet or something, they'll be like, "Whoa, I spent that much in food."
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a great skill that I think we should be teaching in schools for people to track their budgets and learn how to do that. All right, so step 1, figure out if you can afford it, or
That's part of it, but also like really understanding what you actually need or want and feel like you need, and then on like what that cost would be, just like kind of as a baseline, like how much money am I spending to sustain my lifestyle wherever I am, and then from there, where can I cut? Where can I kind of increase my savings and have the capital to do something like that?
But is this something that you were planning before, or is that something that?
Not in particular. So what I was doing was I knew.
Because like for example, I know I would be able to do this if I say, in 2021 I'm gonna travel the world, because you gotta get ready for it financially, all of this. Is this something that you like thought about before and you're like, okay, I'm gonna get ready, or was it something like, all right, I got a little bit of money, let's go?
It was more of the latter, I would say, but it was also just understanding like what I felt like I needed to spend on my life day to day to feel fulfilled and to live the kind of lifestyle I wanted to, and then not getting too caught up in social comparison and buying all this other extra stuff that I really probably didn't need, that I feel like people just kind of do just like, oh, I have the money, so I'm going to spend it. It's like
I have a Rolex, I have an iPhone 10, I got this, I got that. Where have you been? Nowhere. What do you know? Nothing.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And if that's what people's passion and that's what their priorities are, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And I'm not like kind of starting this crusade in a way of saying like, oh, like you should like get rid
don't
of
worry,
material
I'll
stuff.
say it. Stop buying Rolex. Stop buying a BMW. Stop buying a Mercedes Benz.
If that's bringing you
Well, if you can't afford it.
If that's bringing you relative joy and that's something that is kind of having a positive impact on your life, great. I knew that wasn't going to be the case for me, so I just didn't spend that money.
But here's the thing, man. When you die, all that stuff just stays there. Chris, when you die, man, you're gonna have all those memories, all those everything.
Sure.
And it's like.
And so I appreciate, and like that's like the orientation that I take as well for myself personally. But I've got the finances together. Then I was looking at logistics, like what does it mean? What does it mean for the center? What does it mean for my job? What does it mean for my education? I'm still finishing up classes, and so I kind of just looked at everything where I absolutely couldn't leave behind and what I would need to wrap up, and then I made a timeline. And from like kind of first ideation to plane ticket was about 3 weeks.
So did you book all the flights in advance?
No, one ticket.
So you get there, and then from there you figure out when you want to go to the next place.
To some extent, I do have a little bit of a rough idea of what I want to be doing. I'm starting in Southeast Asia for a couple months, going down to Australia, India, Middle East, Europe, and South America. Some kind of order like that. But I really am trying to be open to serendipity, so kind of seeing like what's going to happen.
When do you decide when to go to the next city?
I don't know. I haven't started yet.
You just like planning on like staying there?
Well, I mean, there's some things that are fixed, and it's also important. Like some of this travel stuff is just like it's a great learning experience for me too, because I just haven't done anything like this before.
You're going by yourself?
I'm going by myself.
That's
that's another thing. That's a lot of it's a lot of male privilege to be able to travel alone and feel safe too. It's something I talk about a lot. Like it's a huge privilege to just be like, oh yeah, I'll just walk to the city, I'll figure it out.
Right.
Like that takes a lot of privilege.
And you're not scared at all?
Am I not scared at all? I mean, I think it's just things like very like rigidly. So it's like, am I increasing my relative risk by going to places that I'm not familiar with? Yeah, sure. But the other day, some dude with a gun was waving it around the Brickell Bridge. So like, there's relative risk everywhere. I'm increasing a little bit, but I think that the potential payoff and the growth opportunities are such that the risk doesn't really matter.
And I love the way that your brain works, man. It's like not everybody can work like that. You know, it's a special talent. You know, not everybody can think like that. Because most people will be like, oh, man, I'm terrified, but I'm still going to do it. But what's going to happen to me when I get to somewhere and I don't know, I don't speak the language, or, you know, it's like, what if you get lost somewhere? What, you know.
Yeah, it's possible.
All right, so you figure out, are you doing Airbnb or are you doing hotels? How are you doing this?
Mostly hostels. So to do something like this for the length of time, I do have to be really mindful of budget. And so mostly hostels, some hotels, and then some like kind of alternative arrangements. So like there's like different programs where you like work on a farm for like a couple hours a day in exchange for room and board, and like doing that kind of thing to keep costs down as well. So kind of just a hodgepodge.
I never knew that was a possibility. Yeah. Like I didn't think that was an option.
So it's called wild organic farming, and so you basically like show up at a farm. Like so, I am an unskilled laborer, so I'll be like picking vegetables or something like very menial. I'll do it for a few hours and then just go hiking the rest of the day and come back and get your food and sleep and whatever. And it's those kind of opportunities that I'm really excited about, because that's like growth that you just can't get, working on Miami Beach.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, nothing humbles you more than picking up stuff off the ground. Right. I think.
No, it's just a whole different mindset, man. It's crazy that, people. Okay. I just find it very amazing that someone that they have those programs available and you're going there to do that. And it's like, man, I never thought that existed. I couldn't even, I don't know. I never heard about it before.
Are you going to make a vlog of that? I think that'd be really cool.
So I do. I would like to plug my thing, too. So it's called ccaines.com. I bought a domain name. And so I have, my itinerary, and I'm going to be writing. Another big, part of this project is kind of get back to writing. It's something I've always had a passion about.
Are you going to do... You should do a video blog. That would be a video.
I think I will. I got to figure it out, but...
That's amazing, man.
Yeah. So
when this podcast is over, I'm going to share somebody who does that. She travels.
Okay.
And she records... She's like I think she coined the phrase of she's something selfie photographer. Basically, she takes really high-end photos of herself everywhere she travels. And she also makes videos, so she's really popular on YouTube. I'm going to share her with you so you can get ideas for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important. I really do want to tell the story, especially about it being more accessible to people than people realize. And then also just I think especially at a moment right now where our elected officials disproportionately from one side of the aisle are trying to instill fear about the world around us.
Of course. Make it scary.
To say the world actually isn't that scary of a place. We're all people. Things happen.
And you can only see that when you travel. It's like when you live in the little bubble that most people live in, that they think that it's we're a great nation, but there's more out there. You know, it's something that every time I travel and like I go with somebody and they're like, oh my God, what is this? There's people in the street. It's like, yes, there's this, there's that. You know, like shit happens. You know, here in Miami, shit happens all the time. You know, you can go certain neighborhoods and not be safe. You can be in Brickell and a random guy with a gun comes out and you're like, okay. You know, so.
Well, then again, we also live in Florida, so that kind of puts us in a
Do you think Florida's a crazy state?
Okay. I got a bone to pick with this. So Florida man is the manifestation of confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is the idea that, like something happens, like, oh, Florida man like wrestles crocodile. And it's like, oh, there he goes again, because you're already looking for it. So if you're already looking for stuff, you're more likely to see it.
Right.
That's what confirmation bias is. And so what the media has done about Florida is delegitimize us as a state, because they're like, oh, Florida man does something wild. Well, of course they did. This is classic. Ha ha ha. In the meantime, it like gives license to other people to like talk down about a place that's like rapidly growing, that is has a huge, you know, diverse population.
Bad news are always the ones that get the most.
And it's destructive. I think about what happened with the election when in 2018 when there was some questions about the legitimacy of the election, and like the late night shows that were talking about, oh well, of course it's happening in Florida. I'm like, this is potentially extremely serious if people were disenfranchised and it's a punchline on a late night show.
Right.
That dog don't hunt.
Right.
That really bothers me, actually.
What do you think about the media, man? Because here's the thing. We got social media, which is good in that sense, because now we can get access to information. We don't have to go through TV. Back in the day, people had to sit down, wait for the 6 o'clock news, and pretty much just eat whatever they give them to eat. You know, it's like, this is what happened and this is what you're going to believe, because that's all you had. What do you think the media is doing to people?
So I think the media is a very broad umbrella term. I think we have different ways of consuming news.
How can I consume news that I wouldn't say necessarily tell the truth, because everybody has an agenda? I mean, that's business, right? So how can I, me as a young person, how can I get, I wouldn't say real news, but I would say the real thing that happened?
The first thing to understand is that there's no such thing as objective truth. There is no fact. Like there's no fact. There's just not real, right?
Right.
Like perception is reality. And so you have opinion news, you have kind of like Reuters and AP, and you have like factual like news, like press release stuff. But even that, like from the choices of words, like is what's happening in Venezuela, you know, taking over, like you know, they name your kind of verb to describe what's happening somewhere. That colors people's perception. So there is no such thing as objective news. I think a diversity of sources is usually helpful. Original source material that like isn't just like a meme of somebody saying like of like quotes written on a picture, not actually video the person saying the quote. It's like, maybe that's not the best source to use, or maybe like, look up, did so and so really say this?
Can we really trust history?
I was just about to bring that up too.
Just because, you know, history, I think, is kind of like, hey guys, so this is what happened. All right, everybody agrees? Okay, cool. And then that's what we teach people.
Yeah, well, I mean, so history is written by the winners, right? Because the losers are dead.
Always.
So who do you think is going to look good? It's why we still celebrate Columbus Day in this country, right?
It's like, I went and killed a bunch of people and I took all their gold and everything, and you know, hey, I'm a hero for them.
But it's good. I mean, like I said,
it makes no sense.
Well, the way that I look at it,
actually, it makes tons of sense.
Yes.
It's unfortunate, but it makes tons of sense.
What I was going to say is, you know, any job, small job, big job, whatever, don't we always lie to each other, you know? Like in jobs in general, people that have like a normal job, like your boss will lie to you about certain things, or you'll lie to your boss about something. Imagine in the grand scheme of history, how much we lie.
Yeah. I see everything is a lie, if you think about it.
We're in the Matrix.
All right, Chris. What are you going to do when you come back?
So I'm not sure yet. I think something like this is going to be such a... I just think it's going to be such a transformative experience in a lot of ways that I don't want to lock myself into like a kind of predestined future, like pre that transformation. And so I'm
do you think about the future a lot, or you just kind of live day to day?
I'm trying to not answer the answers. I'm trying to not answer this question with a both answer, but I don't know if I can. I'm like I said before, I'm really obsessive about inputs and data points and learning as much and getting as much information as possible and being very focused on what I'm doing on a daily basis. But I do think about the future a lot, and I think about my place in it, and the people I care about's place in it, and people that are going to come after us, their place in it too. I think you kind of have to, when you, like me, believe that we're at a really serious inflection point in our country. I think if we don't have that future in mind, we really run the risk of exposing ourselves to blind spots in ways that just makes it really difficult for us to prosper as a community.
How were you when you were young? High school. How was your brain and what were you doing? Were you getting in trouble? Were you a party kid? Were you a nerd? What were you?
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about that in a long time, actually. Didn't have a ton of friends. I don't consider myself an introvert necessarily, but I just like my space, and I like my books, and I like
What's your favorite subject?
my thought pieces. Like when I was younger.
Yeah. I'm getting a vibe of like math and science.
No, not really. Math are my weakest subjects. I liked writing some, but I really just liked learning just generally. I really just appreciated the idea that there's just so much information out there. And like there's kind of like three like parts of knowledge, right? It's like what you know you don't know, and what you don't know that you don't know.
Right.
And I love taking things from the what I don't know that I don't know to the I know I don't know, even more than I like taking the I know what I don't know to the I know category.
This is like
right.
My brain's like, what are we talking about?
Like I would rather take something that I don't even know that I'm ignorant about, and then come to know that I'm ignorant about that,
right?
So that I can have a greater appreciation for the people who do know about that, and I know like kind of what questions to ask. I think it's more important to know what questions to ask than have the answers necessarily, and so like that's just like always been my philosophy for things. That's why I really enjoy school. It's why I've pretty much gone nonstop my whole life, and I just don't see myself stopping anytime soon.
24, traveling the world, executive director at the Knight Foundation for a period of time. Then he did the Miami Urban, again, remind me?
Future Initiative.
Future Initiative in FIU. And just 24. You imagine Chris when he's 50?
I'm going to be so insufferable. I'm going to be so annoying. Like, I mean, already people like roll out. I'm just like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Let me just not.
Are you going to be a condescending old man?
I hope not. I hope not.
I don't think you are. I think you're a nice guy. I think that you're going to be...
I appreciate that.
You're going to have a lot to say, a lot of stories to tell.
I think that's one of the reasons why people, when they get older, like, you meet those old people, and they're like the coolest people, but you don't think they're cool before you meet them. And then you're like, man, they're so great. But what's normally associated with them is that they've done a lot of stuff. Yeah. I think it's because they have so much experience and they've lived so much that when you start to run out of time, you're like, the only thing I have now is to share it.
Right. And that's something that I think about a lot. Death. I think people don't like to think about it. Like you were saying, it's like one day we're not going to be here, so might as well make the best of it, and help as many people as you can and give back to the community. That, that's something that most people don't think about that. They're so focused on their 9 to 5, and that's all they do every day, all day. And there's more that you can do. There
is, but it's also a huge privilege to be able to, like, be here, like drinking La Croix in a T-shirt in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week. Like I mean, like it's a huge level of privilege. There's so many people in our community who are just fighting to make ends meet, who, largely through no fault of their own, are subject to just like really tough environments and really tough situations to break out of. And so, I think my biggest something I'm really trying to work on, something I'm really trying to be very cognizant of, is how do I kind of go on this journey, which is like an extremely privileged one.
Yeah, not everybody can do this.
Most people can't. And like, how do I take this journey and take these learnings while still keeping in mind just what a privilege this is to be able to do something like this, and how can I work to expand the ability, like to expand this possibility to more people, and to really fight for a world in which more people have access to doing something like this. I think that's going to be really important for me personally, at least.
Man, amazing. Super proud of you, man. I really like what you're doing. I really appreciate you coming here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And talking to us a little bit about everything that you've been doing. And good luck, and send us pictures. I want to see everything you're doing.
Absolutely.
I want to make sure I have your website open now.
Nice.
I see the You're going to Thailand. You're going to where else are you going to?
Laos, Cambodia,
Laos
Vietnam, Malaysia.
Oh man, that's awesome.
That's amazing.
Man, if you don't make this into a video blog, it's a sin. You
I
got to
will.
shoot a lot of video.
I will. I think I just got to figure
Bali.
out how to do it without being like too intrusive on like the experience
Right.
itself too. Right. I'm not.
Right.
Going
You wanna
to-
enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. But I do agree. I think it's important.
How can people follow you on Instagram?
So at Caines, SEECAINES. It's actually one of my proudest moments, really, of my professional life. I came up with a perfect pun for my blog.
What about your website?
Website, same thing. www.ccaines.com. SEECAINES. And you guys maybe put the link in the.
Yeah.
I got you. Way ahead of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for
Great.
being here.
Thank you.